Iran policy was the subject of Mike Pompeo's first major foreign policy address as U.S. Secretary of State. First, he explained why President Trump dumped out of the Iranian nuclear deal.
It failed to guarantee the safety of the American people from the risk created by the leaders of the Islamic Republic of Iran. No more. No more wealth creation for Iranian kleptocrats. No more acceptance of missiles landing in Riyadh and the Golan Heights. No more cost-free expansions of Iranian power. No more. The JCPOA put the world at risk because of its fatal flaws.
Even before President Trump decided to run for office, he said that this nuclear deal was from the very get-go a very, very bad deal, full of flaws. What were some of those major flaws?
Matter of fact, George, you said it was the worst deal that the United States had ever negotiated. Some of those flaws, one of the main concerns was after 10 years, Iran could start up its nuclear program again, and it's already well on its way, so it wouldn't take long for them to actually acquire a nuclear device. But also the inspections. The inspections were not allowed on military facilities, military bases, so they could just do all their nefarious things on those bases. In addition to that, they had 24 hours or 24 days where they could delay an inspection. That's plenty of time to play the old shell game. Now you see it, now you don't. Move it from here, move it over there. So those were some of the main concerns, but also the fact that there was no linkage. There was no linkage to Iranian behavior in the Middle East and around the world. They could continue to support terrorism in Yemen and Lebanon and Syria against Israel, Hamas, Hezbollah, and so forth without being punished, and there was no linkage of behavior in that.
Let me go to you, Chris. In Jerusalem, Pompeo said that wherever Iranian operatives function in the Middle East or around the world, Secretary of State Pompeo said that the United States will go after them, that they are legitimate targets. Now, those are my words, but the idea is that they were going to go after Iranian operatives working to destabilize either the Middle East or other parts of the world. Your reaction?
Very significant, George, because, those that study Iran know that it has a terror network, not just here in the Middle East, but literally around the world. They finance Hezbollah, which has its tentacles in South America. So I think they're almost taking like an Israeli point of view that wherever Iranian operatives are acting, that they will go ahead and strike them. And I want to add one point that you talked about, George and Gary. I really think what sets this speech apart from everything we've heard for 8 years under the Obama administration is Pompeo speaking directly to the Iranian people and saying, speak up, we're behind you. Back in 2009, millions of people went to the streets in Iran and Tehran and around the country. Even last December, the same thing happened. And now I think you can have an administration that's going to speak up on behalf of the people who have been suppressed by the Islamic regime, not for really decades, almost 40 years next year. And one more point, Bernard Lewis, the expert on Islam, died just a couple of days ago. He predicted that Turkey would become an Islamic republic. He also predicted, and it hasn't come true yet, that because of the frustration with this radical Islam, that Iranians would eventually get a secular nationalistic state. I think the Trump administration is trying to fuel that passion among the Iranian people.
What are some of the key demands this White House is asking of the Iranian regime?
Well, the key demands are this, George. First and foremost, dismantle all nuclear ambitions, all nuclear program activities. In addition to that, eliminate all ballistic missile testing and development of ballistic missiles that can also be used against Israel and other states, whether you have a nuclear device on them or not. In addition to that, stop your support of the Houthi rebels in Yemen, also Hezbollah and Hamas, also your people and your bases in Syria that you've established. So basically, George, this is a big shift from what we've seen for the last 8 years, 8 or 9 years in the past under the Obama administration and early on in Trump's administration. It's a change. It's a shifting away from more of a accommodation of the Iranians to taking them on. And it even led some analysts and some in the media to say, wow, this Pompeo is more of a hawk than Trump is, and we're heading to war. And I don't think that's it. I don't think we're heading to war. I think they're imposing tough sanctions to see if those will work on the Iranian leadership.
What's the likelihood, Chris, that the Iranians are going to roll over and respond in a positive way to all these demands?
Well, I think that's very unlikely, George. Some people might say 2 chances, slim, and none. I think the Iranian regime, the mullahs, the ruling leaders of Iran, are gonna continue to in this vein that they have for almost 40 years, since 1979, from the Islamic Revolution. So I don't think we're going to see any change in the ruling mullahs. I don't think we may see them step back a little bit to calculate how far they can go with this new Trump administration guidelines, how they're dealing with Iran. I think what the Trump administration is trying to do is really speak to the Iranian people and see what they can do to foment a regime change. I don't necessarily see a military action by the United States, but I think they're speaking to the Iranian people and certainly doing what they can practically, like these extreme sanctions they're doing against the regime to stop the funding of this all their warlike efforts throughout the Middle East.
Iranians are already suffering major time, right?
Well, they have been suffering for a long time, and you probably ran into this when you were there. I know I did. People saying these sanctions have to go. They're hurting us. But in addition to the sanctions that have been in place, George, we have unemployment there. It's probably close to 12%. The inflation rate in Iran is close to 10%. The Iranian people are really suffering from a poor economy. Now, they thought when the sanctions had been lifted and this deal was completed in 2015 that they'd have some relief. They haven't seen anything. There's been no economic gain for the people of Iran. It's all been in the pockets, all the money, the $150 billion of unfrozen assets, all in the pockets of their leaders. They admit that. They haven't seen any benefit, and they are really hurting there. As you know, the Iranian people are hurting. This is going to hurt them even more because, as you know as well, George, the leadership, when there are sanctions in place, they always seem to get what they want. Other than maybe having their assets frozen, they can still get plenty of things that they want in the international market. But let me say this, George. I think the key in all of this will be, will our allies in Europe and in the West go along with these sanctions? Now, the administration, the Trump administration, is saying if they do not, we will put sanctions on them.
But the idea is that the White House would encourage Iranians to rise up and take action against their government. What can you tell us about this?
Many people say that the fastest growing church in the world today may be inside Iran, where Iranians are coming to faith in Jesus Christ through dreams and visions. And many of them are so discontented with the sort of oppressive religious regime that is there, and they want freedom, and they're really thirsting. And I think what we're hearing now from Pompeo is this idea that we want to support this idea for freedom in Iran.
And as always, Chris Mitchell, our bureau chief in Jerusalem, thank you for your insights. On behalf of Gary, myself, I'm George Thomas.